Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right to exist. Israel has been attacked by terrorists. It has every right to both defend itself, get its hostages back, and protect its citizens.
Is this the last Labour Party conference before they form the next government? They won't say it out loud, but a consistent 20% poll lead will be raising hopes here in Liverpool. But are voters convinced yet? Many say they don't know what Labour stands for and want to hear more. Are Labour being too cautious? If they win, the Chancellor will be Rachel Reeves, and she joins us here this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's start with an idea you're going to be talking about later in your speech. You're promising this morning to speed up the planning process to get Britain building. That means you're coming directly against NIMBYism, the great British trait. Do we have to get rid of NIMBYism in this country, in your view?
I'm really ambitious for Britain, and when I speak to businesses, which I've done a lot in the last 2.5 years, they tell me that they have money to invest, they want to invest in Britain, but our planning system is holding them back. But also, when I talk to communities and families about their interactions when there's been planning proposals in their area, they say there's no certainty, it drags on for years and years. And when communities host infrastructure, for example, energy infrastructure, they don't get any of the benefits. So we want to speed up the planning process, make it easier to build critical national infrastructure like science labs, gigafactories so we can produce electric vehicles, the 5G infrastructure. But we want communities to benefit when that happens, including, in the case of energy, through cheaper bills.
But you need to say that to your people in your own party as well, MPs in your own party. What we hear for all the time, and listeners will know this, we hear leaders of a party like you saying, we want to build, we want to build, we want to build, and then when things happen in their constituencies, we have MPs saying, we don't want to. And you have basically MPs talking to their constituents in one way, and people like you talking to the nation in another way.
Well, that's why community benefit is so important. So at the moment, if you host a wind farm or a solar farm, you don't get any benefit in terms of the lower bills. And yet this is critical national infrastructure. There are examples, even in the UK and certainly around the world, that when communities host that critical infrastructure, they get money off their bills. I want to see that here in Britain. It's not hardwired into our planning system today. I want to change that.
One of the ways we might get lower bills or a more efficient energy system would be if you nationalised it. There's people in your party, Unite, Union, want you to nationalise it. And they say, Rachel Reeves, you're scared. You're scared to be bold. You're scared to be Labour because you want to show the country that you can govern and therefore you're abandoning your principles. Is it a definite no to nationalising energy?
We're not going to nationalise energy, and let me tell you why. Because when energy bills were at their peak, we looked at what impact it would have if you nationalised the industries. It would cost tens of billions of pounds, and it wouldn't reduce the cost of the energy that is traded on international markets. So we did not feel that that was the right approach. At the time, we said we wanted to have a windfall tax on the huge profits that were being generated, and we would use that money to cut people's bills. That was the right approach. Now, we have also committed to creating GB Energy, wholly owned by the taxpayer, to invest in the generation of new low-carbon industries. But wholesale nationalisation would cost tens of billions of pounds and would not reduce anyone's bills by a penny. Now, the economic inheritance that I will face if I become Chancellor of the Exchequer next year will be dire. We have got public services on their knees, growth on the floor, and a huge cost of living crisis. I'm going to ensure that we spend every pound of taxpayers' money wisely. We crack down on waste and inefficiency, but most crucially, we grow the economy because that is the way to higher living standards, thriving high streets, and good jobs in the places that people live.
Are you going to borrow more in the short term to invest? Because there's reports going out that Labour are willing to borrow to invest.
Well, I've set us out a set of fiscal rules, and I will stick to those with iron discipline.
And people won't know what they are, so does that involve borrowing?
Yeah. So let me tell you what those rules are. Number one is that we will pay for day-to-day expenditure through tax receipts. Second, we will get debt down as a share of our economy, and then only subject to that will we invest in things that are going to grow our economy. Like, for example, the big opportunities in green hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, floating offshore wind, gigafactories so that we produce electric vehicles. But they will all be subject to the fiscal rules, and which I will stick to.
So you'll only borrow if debt's coming down?
We will only borrow if it is as consistent with those fiscal rules, which includes getting debt down as a share of our national economy. Because at the moment, debt is close to 100% of GDP.
I understand
we can't carry on like that, which is why these rules are tough, and it means we won't be able to do everything we want as quickly as possible. But it means that we will have a grip of the public finances in the way that the Tories, frankly, have not had.
So is that a yes then? So if you will only borrow if debt is coming down?
If the debt is coming down by the end of the Parliament, that is
so
the
if you're
only
predicting that debt is coming down, you'll borrow.
Well, those are the fiscal rules that are pretty consistent with.
I understand that. So what I'm saying is you might borrow in the first instance because you know that debt is coming down, or you believe that debt is coming down.
Well, it won't just take our word for it. It will be the independent forecasts of the Office for Budget Responsibility.
But they're wrong all the time as well.
Well,
they're not infallible, are they?
No one is infallible, but remember this time last year, the Tories crashed the economy with a load of unfunded tax cuts, and because they wouldn't let the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility do a forecast of their plans because they were scared about what they would show. I will never do that. I will never play fast and loose with the public finances.
But you will borrow on the expectation of debt coming down.
Well, the government, of course, are borrowing huge amounts today, but we're not getting very much in turn for that investment. So our fiscal rules mean that we will pay for day-to-day spending through tax receipts. We will get debt down as a share of our economy, and then only subject to that will we invest in the things that get our economy growing, because growth is been the missing ingredient these last 13 years of Conservative government. Growth has been on the floor, and that's why we've seen living standards stagnate, and it's why there is so little money available for our public services. We've got to grow the economy, and that is what my plan's about. Getting investment, bringing forward infrastructure investment. That's what it is all about in our conference today, because that is the number one mission for an incoming Labour government with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister.
Yeah. So you're not talking about buy now, pay later, but there is a company here sponsoring events, which is about buy now, pay later company called Zilch. They sponsored a regional party at a conference. Some people are very concerned about it. Some people think that that sort of company is an unhealthy company. It encourages spending that people can't afford. It's one of the blights on people in deprived areas. Are you comfortable that Labour, which should be standing up for deprived people, is taking money from a buy now, pay later company?
Well, we've been very clear that we want to see proper regulation of the buy now, pay later sector. At the moment...
But they don't want to see that regulation.
Well,
and they're paying you money to have a platform to argue against it.
If I'm Chancellor of the Exchequer after the next election, there will be regulation of those sectors. This government has put that on the slow burn. That is not right, because it is borrowing by consumers, and it should be properly regulated.
So why not refuse to take their money? Just make a stand now and say, we don't want your money. This is a really successful conference. We don't need you.
It's a hugely successful conference. I think there is a role for buy now, pay later, but they should be regulated properly, and with Labour they will be.
And you're happy to take money off them?
Well, look, I'm happy for businesses to be here in the greatest numbers ever at this conference. And look, there's nothing wrong with business models that you borrow to pay for spending. That's what we do when we spend on credit cards. But it should be properly regulated, and with Labour it will be.
Just finally, the left has a traditionally pro-Palestinian leaning. You'll be very aware of that. There have been flags outside conference. Jeremy Corbyn wandering around.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn is not a Labour member of Parliament.
I understand that. And are you happy to have different views in your party? Or is there a very firm line? If you want to be in Labour, you have to say Hamas are clearly terrorists. Israel has a right to defend itself. To be in Labour, do you have to hold that view?
Well, yes. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right to exist. Israel has been attacked by terrorists. It has every right to both defend itself, get its hostages back, and protect its citizens. I'm one of the vice chairs of Labour Friends of Israel. I'm deeply concerned by the scenes that we've seen over the last few days. Women and children, young babies, being kidnapped by terrorists. It is appalling, and Israel has every right to protect itself in these circumstances.
And people at an event here cheering for the Palestinian cause, they're not welcome in Labour.
Look, I've got no time for that. I want to see a Palestinian state existing alongside a safe and secure Israel. And what frustrates me so much is that what Hamas has done over the last few days has set back the cause for peace that I am so desperate to see in the Middle East, and that people across Labour are desperate to see in the Middle East. But terrorism is not the way to get there, and I am appalled by what we've seen.
Rachel Reeves, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you.